How are we doing for sound? Fantastic. Wow, it's good to be here. My name is Matt Maudlin. I'm the Chief Relationship Officer of Ping Pongathon. The Pong, as we prefer to call it. I appreciate that the title of Chief Relationship Officer sounds quite grand and suggests that I might have hundreds of people working under me. I don't. And the title isn't nearly as grand as it implies. But I am an incredibly blessed individual on many, many levels, but in my job enables me to do several of the things that Father has gifted me with the ability to do. 3 things in particular: talk a lot, fight slavery and bring captives free, and drink industrial quantities of coffee. Often I get to do all these things at the same time, so that's pretty good. I'm here this morning with my wife of nearly 35 years, Isabel, hand up. We have 4 children aged between 17 and 32. Oh, yeah, I know. 1 or 2 of you are looking aghast and thinking, how can that man possibly have a 32-year-old? I know, it's the skincare regime that I use. Yeah. But it's true, we have 4 children aged between 17 and 32. We live in the beautiful Yarra Valley, and we are part of the community that meets as Yarra Valley Vineyard Christian Fellowship. I've been walking with Jesus since 1990, and I have the current misfortune of following North Melbourne in the AFL. But enough about us. When I talk about Ping Pongathon, there needs to be a little preamble. There's a few loose strands that must be pulled together, but once those strands are aligned, we'll be cooking with gas and we'll be on our way. So let's get on with it. I always love having a clicker. 50 million people in slavery right now. That's too small for me to read, but I think it says it's the most people that's ever been in slavery in human history. This ball, a simple orange table tennis ball. It is 40 millimeters across at its widest point. It weighs 2.7 grams. It's almost non-existent. But in the right hands, the hands of a nationwide freedom-fighting movement, this ball becomes a weapon, and it becomes a weapon of mass freedom. And this sound that is the sound of freedom to literally thousands of people across our planet. Ping Pongathon is an Australia-wide fundraising and advocacy movement. We bring communities together and unite them under one cause, bringing freedom to some of the world's most vulnerable. The fun and freedom of table tennis is our weapon of choice to bring slavery to an end. When communities play Pong, other people are freed. Churches, schools, shopping centres, workplaces, cafes, pubs, universities, backyards. If you can set up a table tennis table, you too can have a Ping Pongathon event. Since our creation 15 years ago, we have raised over $5 million, and we have seen somewhere in the region of 900 unique Ping Pongathon events held nationwide. You see, we believe that good things happen when communities come together to take action together. So first things first, our name, Ping Pongathon. Long name, about this long, about 38 syllables. Too long, so we shorten it to the Pong. Now, fully appreciating that the word Pong sounds funny, and it still does to me all these years on, I can almost guarantee you that by the time I have used up the full allotment of 3.5 hours that David has generously given me to talk in this morning, The P word will be funny no more. We will have normalised the P word, the Pong word. So, the Pong is a proper noun. It's our name. And when one participates in a Pong gathering, that function is known as a Pong event. And as you take part in that Pong event, you yourself will be Ponging. So, hands up if there's any teachers in the room this morning. There's a few. Fantastic. So it's that old teachers thing, you know, I pong, you pong, he, she, it pongs, they pong, we all pong. It all makes sense. We encourage communities to host a Pong event and then see funds raised by simple peer-to-peer fundraising. This year there will be between probably 75 and 85 church and school and business communities right throughout Australia who will be ponging. And I very much hope that here at Wodonga and District BAPS you will have a Pong event yourselves later on in the year. We think this year we will raise somewhere between $550,000 and $650,000 nationwide to add to the $5 million we've raised already. So let's spend just a moment imagining what a Pong event might look like. Well, it all depends on the size of your community. And how many hours you intend to Pong for. If you are a church community of 5 people with an average age of 170, you do not want to Pong for 24 hours. That might end in death. We don't want that. But I can see that there's a lot of people here across the 2 campuses. It might well be that if you decide to hold a Pong event, you decide to Pong for 12 or 24 hours, set up lots of tables. The Pong provides all the videos, all the posters, all the educative piece to talk about slavery. And whenever we Pong for 24 hours, there's always people who Pong individually for the entire 24 hours. And that's hardcore Ponging. And by the time they're finished, it's not so much jet lag that they're suffering as Pong lag. Now, I want to give you a talk, something on the upbeat side of things this morning, and that's not necessarily easy when we're talking about something as evil as slavery. But the Pong is all about bringing light into darkness through something, let's be honest, it's mildly ridiculous what we do, but it's fun and it's upbeat and it works. We frequently hear words like slavery and trafficking, but perhaps we don't really understand what they mean. So experience tells me that it's helpful to spend just a moment or two unpacking 1 or 2 terms. So the first thing that needs to be said is that slavery is a crime. So the Universal Declaration of 1948, put together just after the end of World War II, Article 4 states, "No one shall be held in servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms." So it's not just me standing in front of you saying, I reckon slavery is really bad. No, slavery is a crime. It is illegal. Modern slavery is complex. And we're going to spend just a moment looking at 5 forms of slavery in our world today. These are by no means all the types of slavery there are, but these are 5 of the big ones. Bonded labour. That might be difficult to read, so I'll read it for you. People being forced to work for someone as repayment of a false or an illegal debt. Forced marriage. People, most often women and girls, but not always, are forced to marry against their will. Forced labour and servitude. People being forced to work for little or no pay, often under the threat of violence. Enslavement. This is always the most difficult one to talk about for some reason. Enslavement is exploitation in its purest sense, where people are bought and sold under contract. And yes, sadly, this still happens today. And then something that we all hear about but might not necessarily have a clear understanding of, human trafficking the movement of people across borders, often under pretenses. Once a person is trafficked, their freedoms are taken away from them for the purpose of exploitation. The cost of slavery is individual freedom and economic stagnation. Its impact is global and no country is immune. And if you're sitting here thinking, surely, Matt, we don't have slavery in Australia. Yeah, we do. Global Slavery Index, and how appalling is it that mankind currently needs a global slavery index so we can measure the number of people in slavery in our world today. Well, the Global Slavery Index estimates that there's anywhere between 15,000 and 30,000 people in Australia on any given day who are living in conditions of modern slavery. Of those roughly 50 million people enslaved today, approximately 71% are female, 29% male. 1 in 2 is in a condition of forced labour, and 1 in 4 is a child. 1 in 4 is under 18 years of age. I'm guessing that there's a very good chance that a lot of people in the room today have heard of International Justice Mission, IJM. IJM are the largest justice organisation on the planet. They are awesome, and we happen to support them. I heard from somebody at IJM that the youngest person that they have rescued from online live-streamed abuse is 2 months old. Over my now 9 years with the Pong, I have both heard and seen things that they weren't told to me by reliable sources, credible sources, I would have serious trouble believing. So we have a bit of a job on our hands as a local community, as a national community, as a global community. We Pong because we believe that every single person matters. We Pong because we believe that every single person has been fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God. And we Pong because we believe that every single person deserves to live a life that is free. What we do at the Pong, it should not work. Anybody who knows anything about business will intrinsically know that you cannot fight something as insidious as slavery by playing table tennis. But somehow, wonderfully, you can. This is perhaps my most favourite photograph in the whole world. This is Kara. She lives in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, and she is free now. And I trust that she is as free as every single person who was in the church building this morning is free. But 2 years ago, she wasn't free. She was abused and exploited in some terrible, terrible ways. And then with the help of funds raised by the Pong, one of our partners was able to bring her out of an enslaved situation and into freedom. One of the reasons I love this photo is because of that old kind of grandparent joke of, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. Why do you have to eat an elephant 1 bite at a time? Well, an elephant is huge, and in one sitting, we can't possibly eat all of it. It's going to take us a while. But if we take enough bites of that elephant, we will get through it. We will eat it. How do we free nearly 50 million people from slavery? 1 person at a time. Kara, and then the next one. Yes, I understand. That's a tremendously simplistic model that I've just presented to you. But if the structures are right, if we work together, we can do this. Somehow what we do at the Pong resonates. After all, most of us have a son or a daughter or a best friend or a special sibling, and the thought of them being entrapped in slavery, it doesn't bear thinking about. At least one person in the church this morning is sitting there thinking, okay, so you've raised all these dollars, Matt, $5 million, that's really good. Where does that money go? That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking. We currently support 7 charity partners, 6 working across Southeast Asia and India, and 1 working in Melbourne. Now, these will be far too small to read, so I'll read it for you. So to be supported by the Pong, an organisation must be working in at least one of 3 areas. Firstly, education and prevention. We want to support organisations that are teaching individuals and families and communities and regions about the perils of slavery and what happens when Mr. Trafficker comes knocking on your door. Education and prevention. Prevention, in this case, is better than cure. We work with organisations such as IJM, who are bringing systemic legal change into some countries. In effect, this means seeing men and women who are abusing, exploiting, and profiting from enslaved people, bringing them to justice. And we're told that nothing speaks louder than seeing criminals locked up. And we support organisations who are dealing in rescue and aftercare. Organisations who literally bring people out of enslaved situations. And it's one thing to bring somebody out of an enslaved situation, but then you need to care for that person and love them and support them and provide for their needs and provide some vocational training to take them forward. So that's the 3 areas that we support. To be very clear here, my colleague David and I, and there's only 2 of us in the Pong, we're not the boots on the ground who are doing the work in Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, the Philippines, India and Melbourne. We're encouraging communities across Australia to Pong, to equip and to facilitate the work. We've developed extremely close relationships with our partners across the years. Great groups of people doing some very, at times, dangerous work. We feel honoured to be partnering with them. But we expect a lot from our partners, an awful lot. We have stringent reporting requirements in place. And if a partner does not meet our reporting requirements, we will not fund them. It's as simple as that. And the reason is simple. If you're supporting the work of the Pong and you're putting dollars into Pong's bank account and trusting that that money is being well used, I need to be able to look you in the eye and say, I know that money is being well used. And we know because we go over and we visit our partners annually and we see the work that is being done on behalf of those communities who are Ponging. There's something so completely overwhelming about slavery, the taking away of another's freedom. And there's something so overwhelming about that number of 50 million people. Think about it. That's very nearly twice the population of Australia. But the only way that my colleague David and I have really understood as a way of talking about that number 50 million is to synthesize it right down to one kara. Because we all understand one, don't we? One's you, and it's me, and it's one of our parents or that favourite teacher. When we think of one, we know that one matters. So what if we could use our one life to save one other person from slavery and bring them to freedom? In his parables of the lost sheep and the lost coin, Jesus shows us the importance of one. He went after and found the lost ones again and again. The woman at the well, a man possessed by demons, and the man at the pool at Bethesda, and more. I want to dwell just for a moment here on the impact of Jesus' actions and words, the impact of his obedience to what Father called him to. The woman at the well spread the news about Jesus throughout the land. The man possessed by demons proclaimed throughout the whole city the things Jesus had done for him. Just imagine the impact of these people's words throughout their own communities. Impact, impact, impact. And the ripple effects of what Jesus did and said went on and on. And these ripples, of course, are still being felt today, here, now, in Wodonga this morning. I want to take the very briefest of looks at the words justice and mercy. Now, I fully appreciate that entire volumes of books and preaching sermons have been written about these two words. So please don't shoot the messenger here. I'm just going to take the briefest look at them. I think it's important. Biblically, justice means to make right. It is a relational term. It's about living in right relationship with God, with one another, and with the created order. It's right action and right dealing, things set as they should be. The Hebrew word for justice is mishpat. It appears more than 200 times in the Old Testament, and at its heart, mishpat means treating people equitably, judging fairly, regardless of status or background. The same wrong receives the same justice, and we all know our society doesn't always manage this so well. But mishpat is more than punishment. It's about giving people what they are due: protection, care, advocacy. Again and again, the Old Testament links justice with defending widows, orphans, immigrants, and the poor. Justice reflects the very character of God, and Psalm 68 calls God a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows. God identifies with the vulnerable and takes up their cause. So to put it very simply, justice is care for the vulnerable. Justice reflects the character of God. Justice is right relationship. Justice includes generosity. Israel knew injustice firsthand, enslaved in Egypt under oppression. God rescues them, but before long, they begin committing injustices themselves, and God sends the prophets to call them out. And history shows it again and again and again. The oppressed so often become the oppressors, which means this is not just their problem, it's ours. We all participate in injustice, actively or passively. But then comes the good news. God sends Jesus, not because we earned it, but because he loves us. A gift. Jesus dies on behalf of the guilty, us. Proverbs 28 tells us, evil men do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand it completely. A quick look at mercy. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." Mercy is when it's within our power to punish or to harm, but we choose compassion and forgiveness instead. It doesn't necessarily come naturally. Mercy looks beyond what someone deserves and gives what can only be given through grace. Grace, of course, being undeserved favour. To love mercy, we must remember how much we need it. The Bible tells one long story of God's mercy triumphing over judgment. Despite constant betrayal, God responds with patience. And in the most staggering act of mercy in history, Jesus, sinless, goes to the cross for all of us. I'm sure that we all love mercy when we're receiving it, but extending it, perhaps that's harder. Yet Jesus calls us to mirror the Father. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. The word mercy appears hundreds of times in Scripture, and Jesus distills it beautifully in the golden rule, as it were, from Matthew. Treat others as you would wish to be treated. So if justice demanded our punishment, how would we want to be treated? With wrath or with mercy? If someone strikes me, my instinct might be to strike back harder, but Jesus teaches another way. Bless, pray, refuse revenge. Right at the end of the book of Micah, we read, "Who is a God like you, who pardons sin and forgives? You do not stay angry forever, but delight to show mercy." God delights in mercy. At the Pong, we often talk about standing in the gap of injustice. Standing in the gap is a biblical concept stretching way back into the Old Testament prior to being seen quite starkly in the New. In olden times, if a city wall was being breached, people quite literally had to stand in that gap that had been created lest their city walls were breached by the marauding hordes. Now, this was probably a very costly exercise on a personal level. A dictionary definition of standing in the gap that I really like is to expose oneself for the protection of something, to take the place of a fallen defender or supporter. Now, Scripture shares numerous examples of people standing in the gap for others, and we're just going to fly through some here. Old Testament. God is ready to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because of their sin. He lets Abraham in on his plans. Abraham intercedes on behalf of the people, pleading with God to spare the people if just 50 righteous people might be found. This, of course, proves far more difficult than he initially thought, and some bargaining with God ensues. We are told that Abraham then adjusts that number down to 45, and then 40, and then 30, and then 20. And then finally, God agrees to spare the city if just 10 righteous people might be found. Not enough righteous people were to be found. God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, sparing only Lot and his family. When the Hebrews made their golden calf idols at Mount Sinai, Moses comes down from the mountain, sees their handiwork, is dismayed, condemns them for their unfaithfulness, goes back up the mountain to see God. Rightfully angry, God tells Moses he's ready to do away with the Israelites and start again. But Moses stands in the gap, interceding between God and the people, pleading with God not to wipe them out. And God does not follow through on his original plans, partly because of Moses' intercession. Into Ezekiel, God is condemning Israel for their sins and is looking for one person, just one, to stand in the gap and intercede on behalf of the people, lest he wipes them out. We're told that he could not find one. Esther risks her own life by approaching King Xerxes without being summoned. If you know the story of Esther, you'll understand that approaching King Xerxes without being summoned meant instant death. And she stands in the gap to prevent the planned genocide of the Jews. Into the New Testament. Not sure about you, but if I found myself in Stephen's sandals and was being stoned to death, I'm pretty sure that the very last thing I might pray is, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." Stephen stood in the gap between God and sinful man. And of course, the ultimate example of standing in the gap comes in the death of Jesus. His very purpose in being born human was to give his life as an atoning sacrifice for mankind. Our sin left us, indeed present tense, leaves us vulnerable to divine punishment, divine justice. But Jesus willingly offered his life as the only acceptable payment of our sin. He stood in the gap by hanging and dying on a tree for us. And as he hung there, he said what is perhaps the most extraordinary thing that has ever been said in humankind. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." For most of my years walking with God, which is now 36, I always thought that when he said those words, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing," that he was talking to those people who were in his immediate line of sight. But it's only been in more recent times that I've thought, nah, I think he's talking about everyone. Everyone's sins, everyone past, everyone present, everyone future. I may or may not be right about that, so if somebody can let me know, that'd be good. So can we really stand in the gap for vulnerable individuals? I categorically believe that we can, and at Pong we do. There are already, as I said, thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of individuals whose lives have been impacted by the fact that the Pong community has stood in the gap for someone, quite possibly a girl or a boy, a young man or a young woman, somebody that they're probably never likely to meet. The Pong community stood in the gap, played table tennis, educated itself, raised funds, and impacted somebody's life. And one thing we've learned across the years in Pong, when you impact one person's life, it's never one life that you impact. It goes on and on and on. Generational blessings. So yes, we believe you can stand in a gap of injustice. And when we do, man, we become the conduit of significant change. So what if the one person that you love most in the whole world was one of these 50 million people? How far do you think you would go to try and bring them to freedom? How hard would you fight for this person's life? How far might we be prepared to go to bring freedom to someone else's child? We're almost done. So why does the Pong work? And that's a great question that I'll answer in a second. The reason the Pong works is all about that beautifully smooth and elegant word, juxtaposition. What an ugly word, juxtaposition. Everyone enjoys playing table tennis, right? In fact, I've got this theory, right, that everybody in the world loves playing table tennis. So, if you could indulge me just for a second, can you please find a pulse on your body, either on your wrist or your neck? That'd be great. So my theory goes something like this. If you've got a pulse, you love playing table tennis. And every single person in the room right now has a pulse. So my theory's been proven. Thank you very much. Actually, my notes say to me, if you don't like playing table tennis, you're probably dead already. But I won't say that. Table tennis is the easiest entry-level sport on the planet. And we're all horrified when we think about slavery and exploitation. There's just a gulf between the lightness and fun of table tennis and the darkness and the misery of slavery. A clear juxtaposition. Light infiltrates darkness. Light overcomes darkness. Man, it almost sounds like there's something biblical going on there. And at every Pong event around the country, we hear the same thing. Hitting a table tennis ball brings people together. When people Pong, they talk. We don't know why people talk when they play table tennis, but they do. If David and I are silly enough to go and play squash together, we're not going to talk because we're going to be just too busy trying to keep ourselves alive. We're not talking. If David and I go and play tennis together, we're not going to talk because we're 8 kilometres away from each other on the other side of the net. We're not talking. But we go and have a hit of table tennis together, we talk. Community occurs. We didn't invent this, it's just a happy byproduct. So we keep hearing this feedback from churches and schools. that Pong events help to break down age barriers. To be sure here, when communities Pong, lives of enslaved people are changed forever. But Pong also helps create and shape community on very much a local level. We believe that Pong is a gift to the church, and we invite all church communities, regardless of denomination, to take hold of this gift and to adopt it as a part of their community's missional expression of caring and giving. So David, if you'd be good enough to come up. So this morning, David, I offer you and the elders and the community of Wodonga District Baptist Church the Pong as a gift. And we very much hope that you...
Just checking that in there.
There's a few. We very much hope that you, later on in the year, will hold a Pong event. But my colleague David and I, we have no interest in manipulating any individual or any community into Ponging. That's not what we're on about. If you guys think we want to hold a Pong event, that's something we should be doing. That's fabulous. But if you decide that you don't want to hold a Pong event, we're equally as excited, because that just means, that tells us that you've got that many adventures and adventures that are going on within your church community, where you're standing in gaps of injustice for many, many other people. So we hope that you do, but we understand if you don't. Thank you. So, finally, my encouragement to us all is that we all continue to be people, one way or another, who will stand in the gaps of injustice in our world. Thank you so much for having me here this morning.